everything going on in the world and the stresses, I mean, us adults are going through it, but a lot of times we forget the kids they're even getting it more and more than we are anyway. Because adults, we can handle it a little bit better, I think, but the kids, the impact, I think, we're going to see that come out in the next 2, 3, 4 years. So what can we do to help our children right now?
Such a big question and such an important question to ask. Talk about trauma. I mean, what a year. Everybody has had, all ages, all groups, every person is in this kind of proverbial boat together. But if we think about it, we have to remember a fully developed brain isn't until even age 26. And so while everybody has experienced so much loss, arguably our youth and adolescents have really experienced a significant amount of loss this past year. And if you think about it, childhood and adolescence are really marked by healthy social development, feeling accepted, that identity development. And so the loss of just that daily social interaction, but also those routines and rituals around homecoming and prom and graduation, and all of those things really have a profound impact. And so across the board, we've seen absolutely a significant increase in mental health challenges. And the best way I can describe it is it's kind of every level has had an uptick. So those that maybe really never struggled with true blue mental health challenges are now experiencing some mild challenges. Those that were mild are now moderately really struggling. Those that were moderate are now really experiencing higher acuity symptoms. And so everybody has just kind of shifted up, which makes it a really dangerous time and a critical time to pay attention. And so my biggest piece of advice to caregivers, as hard as it is get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know, it's hard enough to process what's occurred and what is occurring in our lives, and it's harder to talk about it. And I think for caregivers, we want to protect our kids. We don't want them to fear or have pain. And I think that there's this fear of bringing up heavy topics or introducing them to our kids will somehow provoke pain or anguish or anxiety. And the sad reality and the reality of it is that kids are talking about it. And whether they're talking about it with their friends, they're hearing things through the news outlets or social media, my goodness, it's critical that caregivers are a part of that. You know, talking about what's going on, helping them develop their understanding around current events and racial injustice and social inequities and political divide and racial divide and all of the things that have occurred. And then vulnerability. There's a lot of research around kids, or young adults, I should say, that participate in research studies around if they have at least one caregiver that they perceive as somebody that was vulnerable during childhood, how much stronger that relational connection and attachment is over time. And so, again, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's a muscle, just like you go to the gym and you got to work that muscle. You know, practice doesn't maybe make perfect in this sense, but it can certainly strengthen that muscle over time, the more people try to put themselves in that situation.
David, do you have anything further to add on that? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. We're expecting a pandemic on top of the pandemic. And I think it's going to be a lot of the young adults in our society. One statistic that I was alarmed by is since the pandemic started, 1 in 4 young adults ages 18 to 34, 1 in 4 have experienced suicidal thinking. And typically that number is around 5%, 25%. That just speaks to the impact that the last year has had on all of us, to the point where due to financial insecurity, housing, job insecurity, all of the stressors that we've experienced have led people to not want to live anymore. We're facing a crisis in the coming years as people try to cope with that, as people get into treatment and try to come to terms with those feelings and those experiences they've had.
Mary Beth, are you seeing stuff? Are you hearing from adults calling in and asking about their kids, and what type of advice are they asking for?
Yeah, I'd say definitely caregivers are calling in concern because they've noticed behavioral changes in their children, their adolescents. And, sometimes with children and adolescents, they're not going to directly verbalize how they're feeling, but you might notice it more behaviorally with tantrums for little ones, more irritability for your teenagers. So we have a lot of caregivers reaching out, asking how to broach those conversations. And I think that some concrete advice that we can give is to really sit down with your child and tell them what you're noticing. If maybe you're having a bit more conflict, say, hey, I'm noticing that we're having some more difficulties lately. I wonder if you have some big feelings that you want to talk about. And then having that conversation a way where you're listening actively without judgment, where you're empathizing with frustrations, and really trying to become a team with your child and figure out some strategies for what you can do to make some of these things better. We also want parents to be reminded that it's so important to take care of themselves because when we're dealing with depression or anxiety, we can be more irritable, we can be more impatient with the kids in our lives. And when we reach out for support for those needs and maybe get even some professional assistance, we can reduce some of those symptoms and have better relationships with our children and our loved ones.